Eleanor's gone now, so there's no reason for you to stay in this house anymore. Pack your things and find somewhere else to live. My sister-in-law Cordelia announced coldly at my wife's memorial dinner. I just smiled, because I knew something she didn't. Her fate was already sealed. The words hung in the air like poison gas, spreading through the dining room where we just finished honoring my beloved Eleanor's memory. 3 days. It had been exactly 3 days since I'd lowered my wife of 31 years into the ground at Riverside Memorial Cemetery, and this was what I got from her own sister. Cordelia Blackwood sat at the head of my dining table, my table, in my house like she owned the place. Her husband Jasper nodded along like a trained seal, never one to contradict his domineering wife. Their twin daughters, Iris and Violet, both 20-something entitled princesses, smirked from across the table as if they were watching entertainment. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" I asked quietly, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. My voice remained steady, though something cold was crystallizing in my chest. "You heard me, Thaddeus." Cordelia's tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "This house is far too large for one person. The family thinks it would be best if you downsize to something more appropriate for your situation." The family, as if she spoke for everyone, as if Eleanor's death had somehow transferred ownership of my life decisions to her meddling sister. "Eleanor always said this place should stay in the Blackwood family," Jasper added weakly, clearly rehearsed. "With you having no children of your own." No children of our own. The knife twisted deeper. Eleanor and I had tried for years, spent thousands on treatments, endured countless disappointments. Her sister knew exactly how much that comment would sting. "Where exactly do you propose I go?" I asked, studying their faces with the careful attention I'd once reserved for analyzing complex engineering blueprints. "There's a lovely assisted living facility in Millbrook," Cordelia replied with false sweetness. "Much more suitable for someone your age. You're 63, Thaddeus. Time to be practical about these things." 63 and apparently disposable, according to the woman who'd spent decades benefiting from my generosity. The same woman who'd borrowed money for her daughter's private school tuition, who'd asked me to co-sign loans for Jasper's failed business ventures, who'd vacationed in my Lake Geneva cabin every summer for the past 15 years. I looked around the table at their expectant faces, these people who'd just buried my wife and were now carving up the spoils. What they didn't know was that I'd spent 40 years as a civil engineering project manager, and I'd learned a thing or two about structural weaknesses in buildings and in people. "Interesting proposal," I said finally, allowing the smallest smile to cross my lips. "Let me think about it." But I wasn't thinking about their proposal at all. I was thinking about the phone calls I'd received that morning, the ones they didn't know about yet, the ones that would change everything. After they left, I sat in Eleanor's favorite armchair, surrounded by the silence they'd shattered with their demands. The house felt different now, not empty because of Eleanor's absence, but violated by their presumption. I walked to my study and pulled out the filing cabinet where I kept our financial records. 127,000. That's what I'd invested in the Blackwood family over the past 15 years. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every loan agreement meticulously documented because Eleanor had insisted we keep proper records of family assistance. December 2010, 23,000 for Iris and Violet's private school tuition when Jasper's landscaping business went under. Cordelia had cried in our living room, begging us not to let her daughters suffer for their father's failures. "They're so close to graduation, Thaddeus. Please don't let them lose their dreams." March 2013, 35,000 to prevent foreclosure on their Elmwood Avenue house. The bank had issued final notices, and Cordelia had shown up at our door with red eyes and trembling hands. "We'll pay you back with interest," she'd promised. Family takes care of family. August 2015, 28,000 for Violet's wedding at the Grandview Country Club. Eleanor had wanted to give her niece the perfect day, despite my concerns about the cost. "She's like a daughter to us," Eleanor had insisted. "We can afford it." June 2018, 19,000 for Iris's graduate degree program. Another tearful plea from Cordelia about educational opportunities and family loyalty. Another check written without hesitation. January 2020, 22,000 to bail out Jasper's second failed business venture, a food truck that lasted exactly 4 months. This time, Cordelia didn't even bother with promises of repayment. Not once had they repaid a single dollar. Every loan had mysteriously transformed into a gift through their selective memory and my wife's generous heart. Eleanor always found excuses for them. Tough times, unexpected expenses, family obligations. I pulled out the photo from Violet's wedding, where she'd thrown her arms around Eleanor and me during the reception. "Thank you for making this perfect," she'd whispered. "I'm so lucky to have you as my uncle." The same girl who'd smirked at me tonight while her mother ordered me out of my own home. My phone buzzed with a text from Cordelia. "Thaddeus, I hope you understand we're doing this out of love. The assisted living brochures are on your kitchen counter. The sooner you decide, the better for everyone." Out of love. They were repackaging greed as concern, exile as assistance. What they didn't realize was that I'd received some very interesting phone calls that morning from my former colleagues at Morrison Engineering. Calls about the luxury development project that Cordelia had been secretly working on. The same project that required city council approval. The same city council where I still had considerable influence after 4 decades of successful municipal projects. I smiled again, wider this time. Tomorrow, I'd begin showing the Blackwood family exactly what structural engineering principles applied to more than just buildings. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every shadow cast by streetlights reminded me of Eleanor's absence and their audacity. By dawn, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The grief-stricken widower they'd counted on was gone, replaced by someone harder, more calculating. Standing in our bedroom, looking at Eleanor's empty pillow, I made a decision that would have horrified my gentle wife. But Eleanor wasn't here to temper my anger with her endless capacity for forgiveness. She wasn't here to make excuses for her sister's cruelty or find silver linings in betrayal. I'd spent 40 years solving complex engineering problems, analyzing stress points, calculating load-bearing capacities. Buildings failed when their weakest elements were exposed to pressure they couldn't handle. People, I was beginning to realize, operated under similar principles. The morning newspaper lay on my kitchen table next to Cordelia's assisted living brochures. The real estate section showed average home prices in our Riverside Heights neighborhood, $485,000 to $520,000. My house, with its premium lot and Eleanor's immaculate gardens, would easily fetch $550,000 or more. $500,000 that Cordelia wanted me to simply walk away from. $500,000 she probably assumed would eventually flow to her family through some twisted logic of inheritance and blood relations. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen island where Eleanor used to read me snippets from her morning crossword puzzles. The silence was deafening, but it was also clarifying. For 31 years, I'd seen the world through Eleanor's rose-colored glasses, believing the best of people, especially family. Now I was seeing with engineer's eyes, cold, analytical, precise. My phone rang. Cordelia again, calling before 8 a.m. to maintain pressure. "Good morning, Thaddeus. I hope you had time to think about our conversation." I did. My voice sounded different, even to myself. Steadier, more controlled. "Wonderful. Jasper and I would be happy to help you look at facilities today. The one in Millbrook has an opening next week." Next week. They wanted me gone in 7 days, probably so they could move into my house before I changed my mind or consulted a lawyer. "That's very thoughtful, Cordelia, but I've decided to take a different approach." Silence on her end. This wasn't the script she'd expected. "What do you mean, different approach?" "I mean, I'm going to stay exactly where I am. This is my house, purchased with my money, maintained with my labor. Eleanor may be gone, but that doesn't transfer ownership to you. Thaddeus, you're not thinking clearly. Grief can cloud judgment. We're trying to help you make practical decisions. Practical decisions, like signing over my life's work to people who'd never repaid a dime of the money I'd loaned them. My judgment is perfectly clear, Cordelia. Crystal clear, in fact." After I hung up, I walked to my study and pulled out my old contact list. 40 years in municipal engineering had connected me with mayors, city planners, zoning commissioners, environmental inspectors, and building code enforcement officers throughout the region. It was time to dust off those relationships and see exactly what the Blackwood family had been up to lately. My first call was to Dennis Morrison at the Riverside Planning Commission. We'd worked together on the Civic Center renovation project in 2019, and Dennis owed me several favors after I'd solved some complex foundation issues that could have cost the city millions. "Thaddeus, good to hear from you. How are you holding up after Eleanor's passing?" "Taking it day by day, Dennis. Actually, I'm calling about some local development activity. The Blackwood family, specifically Cordelia Blackwood, Seems to be involved in some kind of luxury housing project. I'm curious about the details. A pause. Then Dennis's voice dropped to a more professional tone. Ah, the Meadowbrook Estates proposal. Yes, quite ambitious. Mrs. Blackwood came in last month representing Pinnacle Development Group as their community liaison. Community liaison. Cordelia had never mentioned any job, let alone one with a development company. What's the scope of the project? 120 luxury homes on 40 acres off Henderson Road. Big money involved. Probably $60 million total development cost. Mrs. Blackwood's been pushing hard for expedited approval. Keeps mentioning her connections to local engineering expertise. My blood ran cold. Connections to local engineering expertise. She'd been trading on my reputation without my knowledge, using my 40 years of municipal relationships to grease the wheels for her secret project. Dennis, what's the timeline for approval? City Council votes next Thursday. If approved, groundbreaking starts in 6 weeks. Mrs. Blackwood seems very confident about the outcome. Says she has inside knowledge about potential obstacles and how to address them. Inside knowledge. My knowledge, acquired through decades of navigating municipal bureaucracy, now being exploited by the woman who wanted me out of my own house. I see. Thanks for the information, Dennis. Thaddeus, since you're asking, the environmental impact assessment seems light. Meadowbrook Creek runs right through that property, and there are wetland designation issues that weren't fully addressed. The traffic impact study also looks rushed. Dennis was giving me exactly what I needed without explicitly saying it. Professional courtesy between engineers who understood that shoddy work endangered public safety. After hanging up, I called Rebecca Santos at Environmental Compliance. Another old colleague, another favor owed from a toxic soil remediation project I'd helped her navigate. Rebecca, I need some information about a development proposal called Meadowbrook Estates. 20 minutes later, I had the complete picture. Cordelia wasn't just involved in this project. She stood to make $200,000 in commission if it got approved. $200,000 that depended on her reputation as someone with insider access to municipal decision-makers. The same woman who'd ordered me out of my house was secretly profiting from my professional relationships while planning to inherit my property. She'd calculated that a grieving widower would be too distracted to notice her machinations, too weak to interfere with her plans. I pulled up the project blueprints online and studied them with 40 years of engineering experience. The drainage calculations were wrong. The soil composition analysis was incomplete. The setback requirements violated 3 different municipal codes. Cordelia Blackwood thought she was playing chess with a broken old man. She was about to discover she'd challenged a grandmaster who'd been playing this game since before she was born. I spent the next 3 hours in my study, transforming my grief into something more useful, a systematic plan for justice. My engineering notebooks, unused since retirement, came alive with calculations, timelines, and strategic assessments. The Meadowbrook Estates project was Cordelia's house of cards, and I was about to identify every structural weakness. I mapped out the key approval points: environmental compliance, traffic impact assessment, zoning variance requirements, municipal utility connections, and city council voting schedule. Each point represented a potential failure cascade. Remove the right support beam, and the entire structure would collapse. My first strategic advantage was information asymmetry. Cordelia had no idea I knew about her development deal. She thought she was manipulating a confused widower while secretly monetizing my professional relationships. This gave me operational invisibility. I could move against her interests without detection. My second advantage was professional credibility. 40 years of successful municipal projects had earned me trust with decision-makers throughout the region. When Thaddeus Whitmore raised concerns about public safety or environmental compliance, people listened. My third advantage was technical expertise. I could identify engineering flaws that would stop the project cold, while Cordelia's knowledge was limited to schmoozing and commission calculations. The plan crystallized into 3 phases. Phase 1. Information warfare. I would systematically alert my contacts to legitimate technical concerns about the Meadowbrook project. Not lies or fabrications, but professional observations about genuine safety and compliance issues that a more thorough review would reveal. Phase 2. Regulatory pressure. Once doubts were planted, I would encourage comprehensive reevaluation of all project documentation. Environmental impact studies, soil analysis, traffic projections, utility infrastructure requirements. Everything would need scrutiny that the rushed approval timeline couldn't accommodate. Phase 3. Public interest. If necessary, I would mobilize community opposition by highlighting how the project threatened local water quality, increased traffic congestion, and ignored wetland protections. Citizens' groups were powerful weapons when properly informed and motivated. I opened my laptop and began typing the first email to Dennis Morrison. Dennis, after our conversation, I reviewed the publicly available Meadowbrook Estates documentation. As a professional courtesy, I wanted to share some technical concerns about the drainage calculations and wetland buffer zones. The current plans appear to underestimate seasonal flooding risks from Meadowbrook Creek. The beauty of this approach was its legitimacy. I wasn't sabotaging the project through lies or corruption. I was simply ensuring that proper engineering standards were applied, something Cordelia had tried to shortcut through influence peddling. My phone buzzed with another text from her. Thaddeus, we're concerned about you living alone in that big house. Jasper thinks you should see someone about your decision-making. Grief can affect judgment. I smiled as I typed my response. My judgment has never been clearer, Cordelia. In fact, I'm beginning to see things I never noticed before. The irony was perfect. She thought isolation was making me vulnerable, when in reality, it was sharpening my focus like a laser beam pointed directly at her fraudulent little empire. Tuesday morning brought Cordelia's most aggressive move yet. She arrived at my house unannounced at 8:30 a.m., bringing reinforcements, Iris, Violet, and a woman I didn't recognize wearing a business suit and carrying a leather portfolio. Thaddeus, this is Susan Crawford from Senior Living Solutions, Cordelia announced, pushing past me into my foyer. We thought it would be helpful if you met with a professional who specializes in transition planning for people in your situation. People in my situation. Grieving widowers who needed to be managed by their betters, apparently. The consultant smiled with practiced sympathy, already assessing my home like a real estate appraiser. Mr. Whitmore, I understand you're facing some difficult decisions about your living arrangements. It's completely natural to feel overwhelmed during this transition period. I'm not feeling overwhelmed at all, I replied calmly. In fact, I'm feeling quite clear-headed about my decisions. Cordelia's jaw tightened. This wasn't going according to her script. Thaddeus, we're trying to help you make rational choices. This house is too much responsibility for someone your age. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I've been making some very rational choices lately. Iris, didn't you graduate from Riverside College in 2018? Iris looked confused by the sudden change of subject. Yes, why? And Violet, your wedding at Grandview Country Club was lovely. August 2015, wasn't it? Dad, what's he doing? Violet whispered to Cordelia. I turned to the consultant. Ms. Crawford, I'm curious about your company's client confidentiality policies. If someone were to share false information about a potential client's mental state or financial capacity, what would be your ethical obligations? The woman's professional smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure I understand the question. Let me be more specific. If family members were to claim that an elderly person was incompetent or unable to manage their affairs, but that person was actually of sound mind and making informed decisions, would your company still proceed with transition planning? Cordelia stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. Thaddeus, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Cordelia. I'm stating facts. This is my house, purchased with my earnings, maintained with my labor. Your opinion about its suitability for my needs is irrelevant. But family should. Family? I interrupted. You mean the family that borrowed $127,000 from Eleanor and me over the past 15 years? The family that promised repayment and then forgot those promises existed? That family? The room went dead silent. Iris and Violet exchanged glances, probably calculating which loans I was referring to. The consultant looked extremely uncomfortable, clearly realizing she'd walked into a family dispute that had nothing to do with senior care. I think, I continued, Ms. Crawford should leave. This isn't about transition planning. This is about people who want something that doesn't belong to them. The consultant couldn't get out fast enough, leaving her business cards scattered on my coffee table like abandoned ammunition. After the door closed, Cordelia turned on me with fury I'd never seen before. You've changed, Thaddeus. Eleanor would be ashamed of the man you've become. Eleanor's not here to be ashamed of anything, I replied. But if she were, I think she'd be more ashamed of her sister trying to steal her widowed husband's home 3 days after the funeral. The words hit like physical blows. Cordelia's face went white, then red, then settled into something cold and calculating. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "It's not over. It's just beginning." Within hours of Cordelia's failed intervention, my professional network was mobilizing like a precision military operation. 40 years of municipal engineering had taught me that the most effective campaigns were the ones that appeared completely natural and legitimate. My first email went to Dennis Morrison. "Dennis, I've completed my preliminary review of the Meadowbrook Estates documentation. The drainage calculations contain several concerning assumptions about seasonal flood patterns. I've attached a technical assessment for your consideration." My second email reached Rebecca Santos at Environmental Compliance. "Rebecca, the wetland buffer zones in the Meadowbrook project appear to conflict with federal guidelines established after the 2019 Clean Water Act amendments. Might be worth a closer look before final approval." My third communication was a phone call to Michael Torres at Traffic Engineering. "Mike, I noticed the Meadowbrook impact study assumes Henderson Road can handle an additional 240 vehicle trips daily. Given the existing bottleneck at the elementary school intersection, that seems optimistic." Each contact was legitimate, professional, and based on genuine technical concerns. I wasn't fabricating problems. I was simply ensuring that existing problems received appropriate attention from the right people at the right time. By Wednesday afternoon, the cascade had begun. Dennis called me back. "Thaddeus, after reviewing your analysis, we're recommending a 60-day extension for additional environmental assessment. The city council meeting has been postponed." Rebecca followed an hour later. "The wetland issue is more serious than initially thought. We're requiring new soil samples and a comprehensive ecological impact study. This could delay approval by 3 to 4 months." Michael's call came that evening. "The traffic projections were definitely flawed. We're mandating a new study that includes rush hour analysis and school zone impact assessment. The developers are not happy." Not happy was an understatement. I drove past Pinnacle Development's office Thursday morning and saw Cordelia's car in the parking lot, along with several other vehicles that suggested an emergency meeting was in progress. My phone rang 20 minutes later. "Thaddeus, we need to talk." Cordelia's voice carried a strain I'd never heard before. "About what?" "About whatever you're doing to interfere with legitimate business activities." "I'm not interfering with anything. I'm simply fulfilling my civic duty to ensure proper engineering standards are applied to municipal projects. Don't play games with me. Suddenly the city is finding problems with a project that was ready for approval last week. Perhaps the city is simply being more thorough in their review process. Public safety should never be rushed." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. When Cordelia spoke again, her voice carried a different quality. Desperation masked as threat. "Thaddeus, you're making a mistake. This project is important to a lot of people. People with influence. People who might not appreciate outside interference." "Are you threatening me, Cordelia?" "I'm explaining reality. Some battles aren't worth fighting." "You're right," I agreed. "Some battles aren't worth fighting. But this isn't a battle. This is an education. And the lesson has barely begun." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began composing emails to the Riverside Neighborhood Association, the Henderson Road Business Coalition, and the Meadowbrook Creek Conservation Society. If Cordelia wanted to escalate this to threats and intimidation, I'd show her what real community pressure looked like. By Friday morning, Cordelia's carefully constructed world was crumbling faster than a building with compromised foundation. The Meadowbrook Estates project, which had seemed like a guaranteed 200-0 payday just a week ago, was now mired in regulatory quicksand. I positioned myself at Riverside Coffee, the local gathering spot where business gossip flowed like an underground river. Within an hour, I'd overheard 3 conversations about the problematic development project and the community liaison who oversold her connections. Margaret Chen from the Neighborhood Association approached my table. "Thaddeus, I heard you raised some concerns about the Meadowbrook project. We're organizing a citizens committee to review the environmental impact. Would you consider serving as our technical advisor?" "I'd be honored to help protect our community's interests, Margaret." As I signed the volunteer form, my phone buzzed with a text from Iris. "Uncle Thaddeus, Mom is really upset about some work situation. She says you're causing problems for her job. Can we please work this out like family?" Uncle Thaddeus. Suddenly I was family again, now that they needed something. I deleted the message without responding. The real breakthrough came Saturday morning when my neighbor, Dr. Patricia Holloway, stopped by while walking her dog. Patricia served on the city council and had been following the Meadowbrook controversy with professional interest. Thaddeus, I wanted to thank you for raising those technical concerns about the development project. The more we dig into it, the more problems we find. Problems? The soil contamination issue, for one. Turns out that property was a textile manufacturing site in the 1960s. The environmental assessment completely missed potential chemical residue in the groundwater. Chemical contamination. That was a project killer that would require months of expensive remediation, if the site could be developed at all. There's also the question of who's been lobbying for expedited approval. Patricia continued. Mrs. Blackwood claimed to have insider knowledge about navigating municipal requirements. She specifically mentioned her family connections to experienced municipal engineers. Family connections. Cordelia had been trading on my reputation while planning to exile me from my own home. The audacity was breathtaking. I hope the council will take appropriate time to review all the technical aspects, I said carefully. Oh, we will. In fact, we're considering a full forensic review of how this project got as far as it did without proper scrutiny. Some people may have been making promises they couldn't keep. That afternoon, I drove past Pinnacle Development again. The parking lot was nearly empty, but Cordelia's car sat alone near the entrance. Through the windows, I could see her hunched over a desk, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically. My own phone rang an hour later. Jasper this time, his voice shaky with barely controlled panic. Thaddeus, Cordelia's employer, is questioning her competency. They're saying she misrepresented her access to municipal decision-makers. They might terminate her contract. That's unfortunate, Jasper. Unfortunate? She could lose her job. Her reputation? This affects our whole family. Your whole family, I repeated. The same family that wanted me out of my house so you could benefit from my property value? That's different. We were thinking about your welfare. No, Jasper. You were thinking about your welfare. There's a difference. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. They were finally beginning to understand that actions have consequences, and that the quiet widower they'd tried to manipulate was far more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. Sunday evening brought the phone call I'd been expecting since this whole campaign began. Cordelia's voice was barely recognizable, the commanding authority replaced by desperate pleading. Thaddeus, please. We need to talk. All of us. Can we come over? Of course. Family should discuss these matters face to face. They arrived at 7 p.m. looking like survivors of a natural disaster. Cordelia's usual perfect appearance was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed from what appeared to be days of crying. Jasper looked 20 years older, his shoulders hunched with defeat. Even Iris and Violet had lost their smug entitlement, replaced by the hollow-eyed awareness that their comfortable assumptions about the world had been shattered. I welcomed them into the same living room where they'd ordered me to pack my bags just 2 weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Thaddeus, Cordelia began, and I noticed she was calling me by my name again instead of dismissing me. I've been terminated from Pinnacle Development. They're claiming I misrepresented my professional connections and provided false assurances about project approval. I'm sorry to hear that. They're demanding return of the 15.0 advance they paid me. Money we've already spent on Violet's medical bills. Her voice cracked. The Meadowbrook project is dead. 3 months of work. Gone. My reputation in the development industry is destroyed. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch until Jasper finally spoke. Thaddeus, we know you have connections in the municipal government. We know you could help resolve some of these regulatory issues if you wanted to. Could I? Please, Cordelia whispered. I'm begging you. I know we handled the house situation badly. We were scared about money and made poor decisions. But this is my career, my livelihood. Your livelihood built on exploiting my professional relationships without my knowledge or consent. Iris leaned forward, tears streaming down her face. Uncle Thaddeus, we didn't know Mom was using your name for her business dealings. We thought you'd be happier in a smaller place. Happier? After I'd spent 127.0 supporting your family over 15 years, you thought I'd be happier homeless. Not homeless, Violet protested weakly. Just somewhere more appropriate. Appropriate, I repeated. Let me tell you what's appropriate. It's appropriate for people to face consequences for their actions. It's appropriate for family members to treat each other with respect. It's appropriate for loans to be repaid and promises to be kept. Cordelia broke down completely. Please, Thaddeus. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. Tell us what you want. What can we do to fix this? The question I'd been waiting for. The moment when the power dynamic finally shifted completely. What I want, I said slowly, is very simple. I want acknowledgement. I want respect. I want honesty about what you did and why you did it. Yes, Cordelia nodded frantically. Anything. We'll do anything. I want a written apology, acknowledging that ordering me out of my own home was cruel and inappropriate. Of course. I want repayment of the $127,000 in loans I've provided over the years. The room went silent. That amount represented more money than they'd ever had at one time. And, I continued, I want your solemn promise that you'll never again trade on my professional reputation without my explicit written consent. They stared at me like drowning people looking at a life preserver that might be just out of reach. The silence in my living room was deafening. Cordelia, Jasper, Iris, and Violet sat frozen, processing the magnitude of what I'd just demanded. Finally, Jasper found his voice. Thaddeus, you know we don't have 127. 0. We've never had that kind of money all at once. I walked to my desk and pulled out the manila folder I'd prepared for this exact moment. The same folder containing every loan document, every bank transfer, every receipt from 15 years of their financial emergencies. Let me show you something interesting, I said, spreading the documents across the coffee table. This is a complete timeline of my strategic response to your attempt to steal my home. Cordelia's face went pale as she recognized bank statements, email printouts, and phone records. What? What is this? Evidence of systematic planning. Monday, October 20th, the day after your dinner ultimatum, I contacted Dennis Morrison at the Planning Commission. Not to sabotage your project, but to ensure proper engineering standards were applied. I pulled out a printed email. Tuesday, October 3rd, I reached out to Rebecca Santos about environmental compliance issues. Genuine concerns based on 40 years of experience. You planned this, Iris whispered, horror creeping into her voice. I applied professional methodology to a personal problem. You assumed I was a confused widower who could be easily manipulated. Instead, you discovered that grief can sharpen focus rather than cloud it. I showed them the technical reports I'd compiled. The Meadowbrook project failed because it was fundamentally flawed. Contaminated soil, inadequate drainage, traffic impact miscalculations. I didn't create these problems. I simply ensured they received appropriate attention. Violet was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. But you destroyed Mom's career. Your mother destroyed her own career by misrepresenting her capabilities and trading on stolen reputation. I merely ensured that the truth came to light. Cordelia's voice was barely a whisper. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment you told me to pack my bags. Did you really think someone who spent 4 decades navigating municipal bureaucracy wouldn't understand leverage and strategic pressure? I pulled out my phone and showed them my contact list. 237 professional contacts across 6 counties. City planners, environmental inspectors, zoning commissioners, building code officials, people who trust my judgment and respect my expertise. Jasper's face had gone ashen. You could have helped us. You could have made the project succeed. You're absolutely right. One phone call from me could have smoothed every regulatory hurdle. One recommendation could have fast-tracked the approval process. Instead, you chose to treat me like an obstacle to be removed. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the complete reversal of power dynamics. The most beautiful part is that everything I did was completely legitimate. I raised genuine safety concerns, highlighted real compliance issues, and ensured proper regulatory oversight. I didn't break any rules. I simply applied them correctly. This isn't the man Eleanor married, Cordelia said bitterly. You're right. Eleanor's husband would have written you another check and forgiven your cruelty. But Eleanor isn't here to temper my response with undeserved compassion. You're dealing with someone who's had his assumptions about family loyalty permanently corrected. The room fell silent again as they absorbed the full scope of their miscalculation. They'd tried to manipulate a grieving widower and instead awakened a strategic professional who'd been playing this game at the highest levels for decades. So what happens now? Cordelia asked finally. I smiled. Now we discuss terms. I walked to my desk and withdrew a single sheet of paper I'd prepared earlier that day. The terms were simple, clear, and non-negotiable. These are my conditions for ending the regulatory scrutiny of any future development projects you might pursue, and for considering assistance with your current financial difficulties. Cordelia took the paper with trembling hands and read aloud, Public written apology to be published in the Riverside Heights Community Newsletter. acknowledging inappropriate treatment of family member during time of grief. That's the first requirement, I confirmed. Your neighbors watched you disrespect a man who just buried his wife. They should know you recognize that behavior was unacceptable. The second requirement, she continued reading, is formal acknowledgement of 127,000 in outstanding family loans with structured repayment plan at market interest rates. Jasper's jaw dropped. Thaddeus, we can't possibly. You'll figure it out, the same way you figured out how to spend the money when I was writing the checks. Third, Cordelia's voice cracked. All future business activities requiring municipal approvals must receive written pre-authorization from Thaddeus Whitmore, P.E. Professional engineering license carries legal weight, I explained. If you want to trade on my reputation, you'll do it honestly and with my explicit consent. And fourth, she finished, monthly family dinners at the Whitmore residence, with respectful acknowledgement of family hierarchy and appreciation for past financial support. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. They were calculating their options, weighing pride against survival, dignity against necessity. Finally, Iris spoke. What if we refuse these terms? I leaned forward, my voice carrying the quiet authority of complete control. Then you continue facing the consequences of your own actions, without any assistance from me. Cordelia remains unemployable in the development industry. Your family continues struggling with financial pressures, and I continue living peacefully in my own home, which was always the only thing I wanted. This is blackmail, Violet whispered. This is accountability. You tried to steal my home and exploit my professional relationships. These terms ensure that never happens again while providing you a path toward redemption. Cordelia set down the paper and looked directly at me for the first time since arriving. If we agree to this, will you help restore my professional reputation? I'll provide honest assessments of your work ethic and capabilities to potential employers. Your reputation will be based on your actual performance, not on false claims about family connections. And the loan repayment schedule? Reasonable terms based on your actual income capacity. I'm not trying to destroy you financially. I'm trying to establish appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. Jasper cleared his throat. The monthly dinners? What exactly does that involve? Treating me like the family patriarch who supported you for 15 years, instead of like an inconvenient obstacle to your inheritance plans. Basic courtesy and gratitude. They huddled together for a whispered conference that lasted 5 minutes. When they turned back to me, Cordelia's expression had shifted from desperation to grudging acceptance. We accept your terms. All of them. I nodded and walked to my desk, pulling out 4 copies of a formal agreement I'd had notarized that afternoon. Then let's make this official. As they signed the documents, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Eleanor's death. Peace. Not the peace of forgiveness, but the peace of justice properly served. 3 months later, I sat in my study reading the Riverside Heights community newsletter. Cordelia's public apology was printed on page 3, exactly as promised. I want to publicly acknowledge that my family's treatment of my brother-in-law, Thaddeus Whitmore, following my sister Eleanor's passing was inappropriate and hurtful. During his time of grief, we made demands about his living situation that were disrespectful and presumptuous. Thaddeus has been incredibly generous to our family over many years, and he deserved our support and gratitude, not our judgment. I deeply regret our behavior and am grateful for his continued patience as we work to rebuild our family relationships on a foundation of mutual respect. The monthly family dinners had become surprisingly pleasant affairs. Cordelia now worked as a project coordinator for a small architectural firm, a position I'd helped her secure through a carefully worded recommendation that emphasized her organizational skills while avoiding any mention of municipal connections. She earned less than half her previous income, but it was honest work that didn't depend on exploiting family relationships. Jasper had found steady employment with a landscaping company, finally using his actual skills instead of chasing get-rich-quick schemes. The twins, Iris and Violet, had both taken part-time jobs to help with family expenses, their first real experience with the concept that money had to be earned rather than borrowed. The loan repayment schedule was progressing slowly but steadily. At their current rate, they'd need 12 years to fully repay the 127,000, but I was patient. The monthly payments of 1,200 served more as a reminder of accountability than a financial necessity for me. More importantly, the power dynamic had been permanently corrected. When Cordelia needed a reference for her current job, she'd asked respectfully and provided complete disclosure about what she intended to say. When Jasper needed advice about a landscaping contract, he approached me as a mentor rather than assuming my expertise was freely available for exploitation. The twins had learned to express genuine gratitude for past support instead of treating my generosity as an endless entitlement. Their birthday thank you notes now included specific acknowledgments of college tuition and wedding expenses, rather than generic platitudes about family love. My phone rang, interrupting my reading. Dennis Morrison from the Planning Commission. Thaddeus, I wanted to update you on the Henderson Road development proposal. Thanks to the precedent we set with the Meadowbrook Review, we're now requiring comprehensive technical assessments for all major projects. You really helped us improve our standards. Happy to contribute to public safety, Dennis. Actually, I was wondering if you'd consider joining our technical review board as a consulting engineer. We could use someone with your expertise and integrity. I looked around my study, with its photos of Eleanor and shelves of engineering textbooks. The house was no longer just a refuge from grief. It had become the headquarters of a life rebuilt on principles of respect, accountability, and strategic thinking. I'd be honored to serve, Dennis. After hanging up, I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a scotch. Outside, Eleanor's roses were blooming magnificently in their third spring since her death. She'd always said that proper care and firm boundaries produced the most beautiful results. The evening sun painted the desert sky in shades of gold and crimson, beautiful and unforgiving like justice itself. Cordelia had learned that cruelty has consequences. The twins had discovered that gratitude must be earned through character rather than assumed through genetics. And I had learned that grief, properly channeled, could become the foundation for a stronger, more purposeful life. My phone buzzed with a text from Cordelia. Looking forward to Sunday dinner tomorrow, Thaddeus. Iris is making your favorite dessert to celebrate your new appointment to the review board. Thank you for believing in our family's capacity to do better. I smiled and saved the message. Sometimes the most loving thing you could do was establish boundaries that transformed relationships from exploitation to genuine respect. Eleanor would have been proud of what we'd all become, not despite the conflict, but because of how we'd chosen to resolve it. The house settled into comfortable evening silence around me, no longer empty, but peaceful. Justice, I discovered, wasn't about revenge. It was about creating conditions where everyone involved could become their better selves. If you enjoyed this story of strategic justice and family accountability, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Click the box on the left to hear our next inspiring tale of how quiet strength can overcome loud arrogance.